Welcome back to Atoma Rejects. Kaifus here with another Darktide guide for you. Today I'm going to share a build with you that I'm calling the Emperor's Executioner, mostly because we're going to be using a combat axe. But if you want a build that can clear through hordes like the world's most violent lawnmower, or you want a build that can hack packs of elites to pieces while still being a strong frontline for your team, then this is going to be the build for you. Our main goals are going to be maximizing our horde clear, dealing with gunners and shotgunners, and being a frontline for our team. So let me go ahead and show you how we're going to do that. I know a lot of y'all want me to hop right into the talent tree because that's the most fun and exciting part of any new build, and trust me, we'll get to it, but I do really want to start with our weapon first in this case. If you're really eager to just see the full tree, you can check out the description below for the link to the Gameslantern version of this guide, or you can check out the timestamps to just skip around to different parts of the video. But back to our weapon, the Rashad Mark II Combat Axe. What makes this so special starts with its modifiers, being damage, penetration, finesse, first target, and mobility. Mobility is going to be our dump stat, but what really stands out here is the finesse modifier. For those of you that aren't aware, what finesse does is it gives you extra attack speed, extra weak spot damage, and extra critical hit bonus. As you can imagine, for a zealot using a combat axe, this is incredibly good. For perks, what you're going to be taking is flak damage and carapace damage. We want to take carapace to help shore up a little bit of a weakness the build has against crushers and maulers, but once you take the carapace perk, you can kill them pretty quickly regardless. Now, this is where it really all comes together, is with the blessings. The Rashad has access to Brutal Momentum and, most importantly, Decapitator. Brutal Momentum is a just generally good blessing. You're going to need it for any combat axe build, but having Decapitator with Brutal Momentum just turns it into something different. What Decapitator does is it gives you finesse on enemy one-shot kills. So combining that with the weak spot damage we get from Brutal Momentum and the finesse modifier, we're getting those one-shots on chaff enemies very easily. And once we get 2 or 3 stacks of Decapitator up, we can kill any chaff enemy in the game with one hit. As you can imagine, this just melts hordes completely, and especially mixed hordes. If there's like elites sprinkled in there, this is what this build really shines against. The finesse that we're getting from Decapitator and our weapon is also going to be giving us a lot of attack speed, which combined with some of the talent choices we're going to be making later on, just makes you into a blender. It's pretty ridiculous how quickly you can swing this axe, and because of how quickly you can swing it, you're actually able to kill things like bosses even pretty easily by just chopping them to pieces, especially with those overhead vertical hits that do a lot of damage to bosses. Now for a ranged weapon, we have a couple of different options, but what we're mostly going to be looking for is the ability to quickly deal with specialist enemies, so flamers, bombers, trappers, that kind of thing, and dreg ragers. All of these enemies are extremely dangerous, and sometimes we're not going to be able to get up close and melee them to death, so being able to have a quick draw weapon that has a high rate of fire and can kill these enemies quickly is going to benefit you and your team a lot, because being able to snap up and kill a trapper before it traps your teammate, or kill a flamer before it boxes you in, is obviously going to be good, and you're not always going to be able to get to them with your melee weapon. So with that in mind, the main ones that I like are the Agrippina Braced Autogun, the Columbus Infantry Autogun, and the Shredder Auto Pistol. These are all different variants of autogun, but they all do what I described extremely well, and that's deal with specialist enemies and dreg ragers quickly. They also all have a pretty high suppression rate, which I think is kind of an underrated stat in Darktide, because suppression, it does make enemies around you stop doing things for a little bit of time. So if you need to pull out your Shredder Auto Pistol to quickly gun down a trapper, all the melee enemies around you are going to be staggered, so they're not going to be hitting you, which is obviously going to be really good. So yeah, for a ranged weapon, we do have a couple of options. Just pick whatever your favorite is. If you want to use something else, go for it. Just, I would recommend make sure that it can deal with those particular enemies. So I wouldn't recommend using like a bolter or a flamer, just because they're not good at dealing with those enemies. And if we wanted to go with those weapons, we need to change our talent tree up and probably take the throwing knives. Speaking of talents, probably about time we get into it. I do want to say first, though, that I appreciate y'all watching, and if you don't mind, drop a like, comment, and subscribe down below. Really helps out the channel and lets me know what y'all want to see more of. So with that out of the way, let's talk about talents. We'll go over the big things first. So for our Blitz ability, we're going to be taking Immolation Grenades. These are really good at making space and just kind of dealing damage. They especially deal well with like packs of Bulwarks, for example, the guys with the big shields. Being able to just throw fire on the ground and fight the enemies in the fire is always going to be good. It does a high amount of stagger, it does a good amount of damage, and like I said, it's just a great way to be like, don't stand in this area. It's also really good for picking up down teammates, so I think it kind of edges out the stun grenade in that regard. It still has the stagger effect, but it also does damage, so that's why we're taking it in this particular build. Next up for our aura, we've got Benediction for an extra 15% toughness damage reduction for us and our team. 15% is pretty substantial. It's about what you'd get from a couple of other like big talents in other trees, but for an aura that affects our entire team, it's really good. For our combat ability, we're going to be taking Fear of the Faithful for more attack speed, more damage, more toughness regeneration, that dash ability, it's all in there. It's kind of an all-in-one talent, and we're going to be combining that with Redoubled Zeal to give ourselves 2 charges of it, so we pretty much always have it up whenever we need it. For our keystone, we're going to be taking Inexorable Judgment with Inebriate's Poise. That's pretty tough to say. Thanks for that one, Fat Shark. But basically, this ability gives you momentum. And what momentum does is as you move around the map, running, dashing, dodging, all that good stuff, you're going to gain stacks of momentum up to 20 stacks. And once you hit something with your melee weapon, the stacks kind of activate and they last for 8 seconds. So for each stack, you gain 1% attack speed, or melee attack speed, 1% ranged attack speed, and 1% damage. So we're gaining extra attack speed, extra damage, and extra ranged attack speed, which is surprisingly nice on a couple of different weapons. It really kind of amps up the suppression and can make things die a lot faster. But we're mostly taking it for that extra attack speed and that extra damage. It's just a very reliable way to get it, and combined with some of the utility talents we have in here, we're going to be dashing around a lot, so it's pretty easy to maintain those stacks throughout the game. It's also a capstone or a keystone that you don't really have to think about much. It's not like Martyrdom where, you know, you really have to manage your health and kind of be smart about it. Inexorable Judgment, it's just, you know, you plug it in and it just works, so that's why I really like it, and the attack speed is just easier to access than something like Martyrdom. You could make Martyrdom work with it, but that's not really what I wanted to go for. For our other damage boosts that we get from the talent tree, we have Anoint in Blood, Purge the Unclean, and Backstabber to start off with. Each of these is going to give us a nice damage boost, with Anoint in Blood giving us extra damage to targets with our ranged weapon the closer they are. Since we're going to be in melee range a lot of the time and we want a ranged weapon that we can just switch out really quickly and, you know, kill whatever's close-ish to us, we're not being a sniper, this is a really good talent to have because 25% damage is pretty substantial. Purge the Unclean, same kind of idea. It's 20% extra damage to bosses and to infested enemies, which are like hounds and poxwalkers and, you know, a couple of different bosses, like the Beast of Nurgle is infested, I think. But just getting it for the boss damage alone is nice. We don't really need it for the infested damage because we're going to kill poxwalkers like crazy anyway. And then Backstabber is just an extra 20% damage when you're shooting or when you're hitting things in the back with your melee weapon, which does happen quite a bit when you're dodging around. It's just a nice extra damage boost, and once you have all your modifiers stacked up, this talent, Backstabber, is what allows you to one-shot Dreg shotgunners with, you know, full stacks of Decapitator and all that good stuff. A little farther down in the tree, and we're going to be taking Duelist for the 50% extra weak spot damage for 3 seconds on a dodge, as well as 50% crit damage. This is absolutely huge and will let you wreck things like Maulards and Crushers after you dodge a big hit from them, so it's a pretty important damage boost to take. We're also going to be taking Faithful Frenzy for the 10% attack speed. Like I mentioned a couple of times in this video so far, attack speed is your best friend when you're using a combat axe. Just being able to swing it faster is just going to kill things so much quicker. And we're going to cap off the damage boost from the tree with Sustained Assault. This is a pretty basic talent. It gives you 4% damage, stacking 5 times when you just melee an enemy. It's very easy to activate and, you know, totals up to 20% extra damage, which again is pretty substantial. So that's all the damage boosts we have in the tree. So next up, we're going to look at the utility that we're bringing. First of the utility talents, we're taking Restoring Faith and the Emperor's Bullet. Restoring Faith is really nice because it's just passive regen over time whenever you take damage. And this is damage to your health bar, not to your toughness. But whenever you take health damage, it's going to restore up to 25% of the damage you took, which is a nice little boost to help keep us alive a little bit longer. Being tanky is fairly important to this build, so having more toughness damage reduction and more ability to regenerate our health when we do lose it is going to be pretty important. Then we have the Emperor's Bullet, which is going to give us attack speed and impact, which is basically the ability to stagger enemies for 5 seconds after we empty our ranged weapon. So a very good thing to do usually is like you see a big pack of enemies coming, you pull out your ranged weapon, you blaze away until you're empty, and then you wade into melee with that extra attack speed and that extra stagger. This is really going to help, especially against like big packs of ragers or, you know, big packs of maulers, just whatever you just don't want to be hitting you. This is a great talent for that. Moving right along, we have Dance of Death and Thy Wrath Be Swift. Thy Wrath Be Swift has to be one of my favorite names for a talent in the entire game. But Dance of Death is kind of, it's just we're mostly taking it to get Thy Wrath Be Swift, but it's still going to be nice, because whenever you dodge in close range with your ranged weapon out, you're getting 75% reduction on the spread of the bullets and minus 50% recoil for 3 seconds. So if you're using one of the weapons I recommended for this build, this talent is actually going to do a lot of work with keeping your shots accurate and being able to hit things reliably. So, you know, we're kind of taking it just to get to another talent, but it's still one that you should be aware of that you have, and it does have a place. Now for Thy Wrath Be Swift, it lets it so enemy melee attacks cannot stun you, so you won't ever get interrupted from your melee attacks from taking damage. But another little interaction that it has, I don't think it's intentional, but it prevents ranged enemies from basically stun locking you. If you've ever felt like, oh my god, why are these gunners not letting me move, Thy Wrath Be Swift makes it so that's just not an issue. You don't get staggered as badly, especially not from, you know, minor gunners like regular shooting enemies or the actual elite gunners. They won't be able to stagger you nearly as easily when you take this talent. Things like Reapers will still give you a little bit of problems. They have a ton of stagger on their damage or on their weapon, but for all the other shooters, this is going to help you immensely with not getting stuck and mowed down. Next up, we have a very iconic talent duo in Until Death and Holy Revenant. Until Death gives you 5 seconds of invulnerability whenever you would take fatal damage, giving you enough time to kind of get out of whatever situation you were in. Or if you get something like you get trappered and then a bomber hits you, you won't die immediately, so your teammate actually has a chance to come revive you. So it's a pretty useful talent to have. And then Holy Revenant just adds a little bit on top of that by letting you regenerate up to 25% of your max health by doing damage while Until Death is active. So between these two, you're getting a lot of staying power. It's really going to help you out with not dying. You'll actually see it here on the screen. I get popped by a crusher, but I can still hack my way through the horde, heal up a little bit, and then run away before I finally die. And then, you know, I'm able to heal myself up and get back in the fight. So it is a very useful talent to have in any Zealot tree, but it's especially good in this one since we're really focusing on being that frontline fighter for our team. So now that you've seen the whole build, let's talk briefly about Curios. So for me, I like to run 1 stamina, 1 toughness, and 1 health. But in this particular build, you can swap out the stamina for an extra health curio if you want to, or toughness, I suppose. But health kind of synergizes well with Restoring Faith and Holy Revenant, because the more health we have, the more health we'll get back from those talents. But as far as the perks on all the Curios go, it's going to be the same across the board. You're going to take damage resistance against gunners, because gunners are going to be one of the main ways that you'll die, is they'll strip you of your toughness, and then something will bonk you once and you'll die. So taking gunner resistance is pretty important. I really like to take toughness regen. It doesn't work while you're in melee with stuff, but a good way to do it is, like, say you run up and you kill a whole bunch of shotgunners, you can then run back to your team, let that toughness come up, pull out your ranged weapon, get your toughness all the way back up before jumping back into the fight. Now to wrap this all up, I do want to show y'all a couple of things about how the Rashad works and basically the best way to use it. It is a pretty simple weapon. It's not like the Eviscerator where it's got a bunch of different moves and you have to kind of juggle them all. But it is still nice to know the different combos that you can use and basically how to use the weapon best. So join me in the Icanium real quick and then we'll wrap this thing up. To wrap the video up, I just want to give you a quick demonstration of how this build kind of meshes together. So what we're going to do is we're going to run until we get our momentum stacked up. You can see it stacking at the bottom of the screen there. Once you get to 20 stacks, that's the full stacks. So we run up, we run in this pack of poxwalkers or groaners, chop them to pieces. As you can see, it kills them absurdly fast. Now that we have Decapitator fully stacked, we use our Fury of the Faithful and just start murdering everything. With Decapitator fully stacked up, you'll be able to kill a Mauler in 3 hits if you have Carapace on the weapon. I unfortunately don't. But if you have Carapace on there, it's 3 hits to kill a Mauler, which is really nice, and it'll be 1 hit to kill a Gunner, which is also really, really good. Even if you don't have all the buffs stacked up, it's still going to be pretty quick. It's usually 2 hits. Lastly, I just want to give a quick tip about Fury of the Faithful. I don't know if everybody is aware of this, so if you're new to the game or new to the class, this is just a really good thing to know. But when you use your F ability, you get an absurd amount of rending on your attacks for some reason. It's not listed in the ability. It's not probably not supposed to do it, but it's been in the game since the beta. But basically, when you hit your F, well, you'll see first when I shoot this Crusher, it does like no damage, right? But if I press my F and back up, now it actually kills it. So that's just a really nice thing to be able to know. So if there is a Crusher coming towards you and you need to kill it really quickly, you can pull out your ranged weapon and just shoot it to death. Same thing with like Maulers, you'll kill them really quickly as well. So yeah, just a nice little thing to be aware of and to use in your games. But with that all said, I wanted to say thank you so much if you made it to the end of this video. I really do appreciate it. I'm just thrilled that so many people watch these guides and hopefully get some enjoyment out of them. But if you want to see a new or a different guide, different build, just drop a comment below and let me know what you're looking for, and I'll make sure to bring it to you. I have so much fun with designing builds, and it's probably my favorite thing about this game. So yeah, until next time, this is Kaifus, signing out.